Rich millionaire neglects pregnant wife for mistress until wife finally snaps and leaves him. Ever wonder how quickly a fairy tale marriage can turn into a heart-wrenching tragedy? Meet Rebecca Monroe, a gentle soul who believed she'd married the love of her life, and Thomas Monroe, a self-made millionaire whose charming smile and ambitious spirit once stole her heart. In a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of New York City, Rebecca is expecting their first child, a moment that should bind a couple closer than ever. But shadows lurk in golden corridors. Thomas has a secret mistress, and his pregnant wife's pleas for love go ignored. When heartbreak reaches its peak, Rebecca snaps. Her explosive decision to leave catapults this story into a whirlwind of betrayal, redemption, and twists no one saw coming. When Rebecca Peterson first laid eyes on Thomas Monroe in the elegant lobby of the St. Regis Hotel in Manhattan, it felt like a scene straight out of a romance movie. Rebecca was there to finalize details for her upcoming charity event, a fundraiser for the Children's Heart Foundation. She wasn't a powerful executive or an heiress. She was a kind-hearted event planner who'd quietly built a reputation for hosting successful charity galas. That day, dressed in a simple navy blue sheath dress and modest heels, Rebecca radiated a confident calm that immediately caught Thomas's eye. Thomas, on the other hand, was attending a high-powered networking conference for CEOs. Striding across the marble floor, he exuded magnetic energy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair brushed neatly to one side, and an impeccable Tom Ford suit that screamed wealth and status. A hush seemed to fall over the crowd as he approached. Heads turned whenever he passed by. Everyone in New York's high society circles knew Thomas Monroe, the talented founder of Monroe Innovations, a tech empire that had soared in value almost overnight. Their introduction was orchestrated by pure chance. The conference had booked the same event space that Rebecca's charity needed for its gala. A scheduling mishap forced them into an impromptu meeting to figure out which event would go where and when. It was in the midst of a tense conversation about time slots and venue layouts that Thomas locked eyes with Rebecca. Something unspoken passed between them, a moment so potent that it dissolved the stress from the scheduling conflict. Before they knew it, both agreed on a compromise that benefited everyone. The lingering moment that followed felt downright cinematic. Thomas insisted on walking Rebecca to her car, offering her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. It was there, by her car, that he asked if he could see her again formally, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of surprise and excitement. In a city where everything moved at breakneck speed, this sincere, gentlemanly gesture felt like a breath of fresh air. Rebecca nodded. They exchanged phone numbers. It was the start of what would become a whirlwind romance that onlookers would dub fated. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Thomas invited Rebecca to exclusive soirees on the Upper East Side, and she introduced him to the heartfelt world of charitable endeavors, hospital visits, orphanage fundraisers, and more. They seemed to complement each other perfectly. Thomas's large philanthropic donations shone even brighter, with Rebecca's genuine empathy guiding them. Their combined presence lit up ballrooms, and every society page in the tabloids documented this power couple that seemed to have it all. The most thrilling part was that, beneath the glitz, their connection felt sincere. Rebecca had her own modest childhood memories, and had worked tirelessly to build her successful event-planning business. She admired Thomas's ambition, but what truly captivated her was his vulnerability stories of how, as a boy in Queens, he'd watched his father struggle to pay rent. Those memories drove him to become the powerful entrepreneur he was. They bonded over stories of humble beginnings, unstoppable dreams, and the desire to give back to the world. Nobody was surprised when Thomas proposed to Rebecca at a rooftop dinner overlooking Central Park. Dressed in a white tuxedo, he got down on one knee with a breathtaking diamond ring from Tiffany's. Tearfully, Rebecca said yes. The tabloids exploded with headlines. Tech mogul Thomas Monroe engaged to charitable powerhouse Rebecca Peterson. High-profile friends applauded the couple at a lavish engagement party at the Waldorf Astoria, rumored to cost over $1 million. The wedding, set months later, was equally grand, but still touched by Rebecca's trademark sincerity, a tasteful blend of extravagance and compassion. From the outside, their marriage looked like a storybook dream, but behind the closed doors of their gleaming penthouse on Fifth Avenue, small cracks began to form. The kind of cracks that, while invisible in the rush of newlywed bliss, eventually break even the mightiest foundation. Thomas and Rebecca's first year of marriage sparkled with excitement. They honeymooned in Seychelles, basking in the golden sun with turquoise waters stretching out before them. They traveled through Europe, buying antique furniture in Paris and exploring hidden vineyards in Tuscany. Rebecca decorated their penthouse with personal touches, family photographs, souvenirs from their travels, and little notes that embodied her warmth. However, soon after their honeymoon, Thomas's business began to expand even more rapidly. Monroe Innovations had launched a new line of artificial intelligence products that attracted international investors. Meetings with venture capitalists, constant flights to Silicon Valley, and late-night strategic sessions occupied more and more of Thomas's time. At first, Rebecca found the busyness thrilling. She was proud of Thomas's achievements and supported him wholeheartedly. She'd grown up hearing that behind every successful man stood a supportive woman, and she was determined to be that anchor for him. Yet, as months passed, the novelty wore off. Thomas began missing dinner dates, coming home after midnight and leaving before dawn. In the mornings, Rebecca often woke to an empty bed, only to find a sweet but impersonal text message: "Off to an early meeting, love you." The emotional distance that was creeping in felt alien to Rebecca. When she confronted him one evening, Thomas offered a plausible explanation: "I'm doing this for us, for our future family." His smooth voice and the exhaustion etched into his eyes made her heart soften. She understood that building an empire was no small feat. Meanwhile, their social circle expanded. Thomas's business partners, shareholders, and prominent lobbyists filled their weekends. It seemed like every other day they were hosting dinner parties at their penthouse, with name-brand catering, live jazz bands, and carefully curated guest lists. Rebecca, ever the gracious hostess, ensured each party flowed seamlessly, yet she often felt overshadowed. The men talked shop around Thomas stocks, acquisitions, technology breakthroughs. Conversations with the women, too, often revolved around money designer labels, real estate investments, and yacht clubs. Rebecca sometimes felt out of place, craving genuine connections rather than superficial small talk. Despite these challenges, Rebecca never doubted Thomas's devotion until subtle signs told her something was amiss. He guarded his phone more carefully, stepping aside for certain calls. Familiar warmth faded from his gaze. The shift was slight at first, but day by day it grew impossible to ignore. One crisp autumn evening, after another lavish dinner party concluded, Rebecca gathered empty champagne flutes and half-eaten desserts, quietly observing Thomas in the corner of the living room. He was deep in conversation with a tall, elegant brunette named Olivia King, a venture capitalist from London who had soared onto the New York scene. Thomas spoke in low, animated tones, his eyes occasionally flickering with intensity. Olivia laughed, tilting her head in a gesture of rapt attention. A small pang of jealousy flickered in Rebecca's chest, but she dismissed it as mere nerves. In the days that followed, Olivia's presence seemed to loom everywhere. She turned up at networking events, board meetings, and charity functions, always poised, always with that same flirtatio us laugh. Rebecca noticed how Thomas gravitated toward her, how they exchanged inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else in the room. But Thomas dismissed any worry, Rebecca voiced. "Don't be ridiculous," he said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Olivia's just another investor. She's important for the next funding round. You don't have to worry." The seeds of doubt were sown, though, and as the demands of Monroe Innovations soared, Thomas grew more distant at home. He started traveling frequently, San Francisco, London, Berlin. Rebecca was left alone in a penthouse that felt too large and too quiet, where the ticking of the grandfather clock only magnified her loneliness. Wanting some semblance of normalcy, Rebecca continued her charity work. She planned a fundraising gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, intending to raise money for an underfunded pediatric hospital in Harlem. She poured herself into the event, hoping Thomas might take notice and share in her passion for good causes like he used to. When she asked if he could attend, he simply sighed. "I have back-to-back meetings that day. I'll try to drop by if I can." The night of the gala arrived. Rebecca stood at the entrance, greeting donors in a flowing emerald gown. Her hair was styled in a classic chignon, and though her smile lit up the entire museum, there was an ache underneath it. She kept glancing at the grand doors, waiting for Thomas to sweep in with his charismatic flair. Midnight came and went. He never arrived. In the early hours, a text message buzzed on her phone. "Sorry, got held up. Proud of you. See you at home." The disappointment stung. This was the second major event he had missed, and something inside her was beginning to crack. Rebecca returned home alone, wearing the same emerald gown. The penthouse was dark. She made her way to the bedroom, heart heavy, only to find Thomas asleep, phone lying inches from his hand. A bright notification flashed on the screen. When she instinctively glanced at it, her stomach lurched. A message from Olivia. It read, "Thinking of you. Can't wait for tomorrow's meeting, just the two of us." That night, Rebecca slept in the guest room for the first time in their marriage. Eyes wide open, thoughts buzzing with heartbreak. The tension between them was almost palpable the next morning. Thomas, haggard, apologized for missing the gala, but offered no real explanation besides work. Rebecca, exhausted from heartbreak, left to finalize her event's finances. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Is Olivia just a friend? Why is he distancing himself like this? Where did my loving husband go? Life took a drastic turn when, a week later, Rebecca missed her period. Initially dismissing it as stress, she decided to check with a pregnancy test. She stared at the positive result in disbelief, heart pounding. She took another, then another. All confirmed the same news. She was pregnant. A flood of emotions took over. She was elated, yet terrified. She imagined Thomas's excitement, hoping this baby might reawaken the closeness they once shared. That evening, she prepared a candlelit dinner pasta carbonara with a side of Caesar salad, an homage to their first official date. She anxiously waited for Thomas to come home. But as the hours dragged by, the dinner grew cold and the candles burned low. Rebecca's anxiousness turned to anger. Finally, at nearly 11 o'clock, Thomas walked in, looking surprised by the elaborate setup. "What's all this?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I wanted to surprise you." Rebecca forced a smile. She tried to ignore the faint perfume that clung to his jacket, a scent that wasn't hers. "I have some news." Thomas looked at the cold food and the dwindling candles, guilt flickering across his face. "Rebecca, I'm sorry I'm so late." She cut him off. "I'm pregnant." She let the words linger, her heart pounding. Thomas paused, the color draining from his face, replaced by an emotion Rebecca couldn't quite decipher. "Pregnant?" He approached her, placing a tentative hand on her shoulder. Are you sure?" Rebecca nodded, tears threatening to spill. Yes, I'm sure. For a moment, Thomas seemed overwhelmed. He held her face gently, leaning in to kiss her forehead. That's incredible, he said, though his voice lacked the exuberance she had expected. She tried to catch his gaze, searching for the spark of happiness that once burned so brightly. His eyes, however, looked distant. Even in this monumental moment, his mind seemed elsewhere. Still, Rebecca clung to hope. She believed that once the initial shock wore off, Thomas would realize the blessing they'd been given. She envisioned them shopping for baby clothes, decorating a nursery, and sharing the news with loved ones. The possibility of reconnection gave her strength. Yet the days that followed told a different story. Thomas remained as busy as ever. He barely inquired about Rebecca's doctor visits, and if she brought up baby-related topics, he'd nod absently, then excuse himself to answer a work call or dive into emails. Tension grew, and so did Rebecca's desperation for a meaningful connection. Thomas's relationship with Olivia King escalated in ways Rebecca could no longer ignore. She overheard phone calls at odd hours, some hushed conversation about meeting in private. When she dared question him, Thomas deflected with frustration. Olivia's an essential part of the new deal, he would insist. If we land her investment firm, Monroe Innovations will skyrocket. Yet, it wasn't just about business. The text messages Rebecca occasionally glimpsed bordered on affectionate inside jokes, dinner plans that extended late into the night. Once, she noticed a lipstick stain on his shirt collar, a stark burgundy hue that definitely wasn't Rebecca's more subdued palette. Meanwhile, Rebecca's pregnancy marched on. Nausea, mood swings, and the constant swirl of hormones hit her hard. She attended her prenatal checkups mostly alone, until one day her friend Sarah Davis accompanied her for moral support. Sarah had been Rebecca's roommate in college, and though she lived in Los Angeles now, she happened to be in town for a short visit. During the ultrasound appointment, Rebecca and Sarah watched the monitor in awe, listening to the rapid whoosh of the baby's heartbeat. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes, tears of amazement, wonder, and a looming sadness that Thomas wasn't there to share in this precious moment. That evening, armed with ultrasound pictures, Rebecca tried to discuss the experience with Thomas. "You won't believe how clear the heartbeat was," she said softly, gently showing him the black and white printouts. "I hope you can come next time." Thomas glanced up from his laptop. "It looks great," he said, giving a cursory glance before turning back to his screen. His phone buzzed. He picked it up instantly. "Sorry, I need to take this." She watched him walk out of the living room, phone pressed to his ear. Her eyes drifted to the ultrasound photos. The hollow ache in her chest intensified. In that moment, she felt lonelier than she ever had in her life, carrying the weight of a child she longed to share with her husband, only to find he was emotionally absent. Thomas's lateness became habitual. Some nights he didn't come home at all, claiming emergency business situations as the cause. Whenever Rebecca tried to confront him, he either brushed her off or dismissed her concerns. The word overreacting was thrown around more than once, driving a wedge deeper between them. During an evening at a tech conference in Las Vegas, Thomas extended his trip under the pretense of meeting new investors. Photos surfaced on social media, Thomas, Olivia, and a group of well-dressed business associates partying at an exclusive nightclub. The images showed Thomas and Olivia standing a bit too close, their smiles too intimate. Rebecca saw them the next morning, courtesy of a concerned acquaintance, and the blow felt like a physical punch to her stomach. Struggling with morning sickness and heartbreak, Rebecca dialed Thomas's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. She left a trembling message. "Thomas, I'm worried. You've been gone for days, and I'm seeing pictures people are talking. Please call me back." She never received a response. When Thomas finally returned, he seemed unapologetic, even irritated. "You're acting paranoid," he said, tossing his suitcase onto the bed. "I told you Olivia is crucial for the business. We were sealing deals. Sometimes that means entertaining clients. You know how it goes, but those photos were taken out of context. He cut her off. I'm tired of explaining myself. Can you just trust me? Rebecca stared at him, tears threatening to spill once more. This was not the man she married. The shift was almost unrecognizable. Instead of being loving and supportive to his pregnant wife, he had become distant, cold, and dismissive. Yet a small part of her clung to the hope that there was an explanation she simply didn't see. In a last-ditch effort, she proposed therapy, couples counseling. Thomas brushed it aside. I don't have time for that, Rebecca, he muttered, rolling his eyes. We need to focus on the baby and my business. We don't need a stranger telling us how to run our marriage. Her heart sank, but she resolved to endure. She was pregnant, after all, and she still loved him, fiercely loved the memory of the man who had once knelt on a rooftop and promised her the world. By the time Rebecca reached her second trimester, she had developed a persistent sense of dread. On the outside, she maintained appearances, still attending charity events, though she cut back on working full-time due to her pregnancy's strain. She faked smiles at business dinners, receiving polite but pitying nods from those who suspected something was wrong. It was at one such function, a high-profile banquet at Cipriani's, that tensions escalated publicly. Thomas and Rebecca arrived together, yet no sooner had they stepped into the grand venue than Thomas disappeared by Olivia's side. Rebecca, left awkwardly alone, pretended to be engrossed in conversation with a gallery owner from Chelsea. But she couldn't ignore the stares. People whispered behind their champagne flutes, pointing out how Thomas doted on Olivia, the mistress. Later that evening, in front of the gilded bathrooms, Rebecca confronted Thomas, voice shaking with anger. Can't you see everyone is talking? You're humiliating me, she whispered, trying to keep a low tone so as not to create a scene. Thomas's jaw tightened. I'm doing what's necessary for my business, he hissed. Stop making a public spectacle. Before she could respond, Olivia emerged from the women's restroom. She cast a glance at Rebecca, offering a sickly sweet smile that made Rebecca's blood run cold. Everything all right here? Olivia asked, feigning innocence. Rebecca's fists clenched. She wanted to scream at Olivia, to demand an explanation or to claw back the husband she felt slipping away. But one glance at Thomas's stone-cold expression told her she'd only be humiliating herself further. She took a deep breath and stormed out, tears stinging her eyes. A swirl of conflicting emotions raged inside her, humiliation, fury, hurt, and yet she was pregnant. She felt trapped, tethered to a man who was increasingly unrecognizable. Weeks passed, and Rebecca tried coping the best she could. She focused on her prenatal care, forging a fragile inner peace that hinged on the baby's health. Her best friend, Sarah Davis, called daily, offering emotional support from across the country. Even her parents, who lived in rural Pennsylvania, sensed something was wrong. Come stay with us for a while, her mother urged over the phone, her voice lined with concern. Rebecca hesitated. Part of her wanted to flee, to escape the penthouse with its memories of a distant fairy tale. Another part feared that leaving might mean giving up on her marriage entirely. She still remembered those heartfelt moments with Thomas, his vow to cherish her, the promise of a better life for their future family. Her tipping point came on a stormy afternoon. The sky was grey, thunder rolled in the distance, and rain pelted the windows with relentless force. Rebecca was in the master bedroom, sifting through baby catalogues, trying to pick out a crib. She realized with a jolt that Thomas hadn't even asked about the nursery. He had no idea which room would house their child or what decorations might bring comfort to a newborn. She decided then and there to address it. She marched to Thomas's study, where he was hunched over his laptop. Without knocking, she opened the door and found him startled, quickly minimizing a messaging screen. On it, she'd glimpsed Olivia's name. Her breath caught, but she swallowed her rage, determined to speak calmly. "Thomas," she began, voice trembling with hurt. "We need to talk about the baby, about us." He pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. "Not now, Rebecca. I'm in the middle of something important. This can't wait." Her voice cracked. "I can't do this alone. You're never here. And when you are here, you're distant. You're acting like this baby is nothing but an inconvenience." Thomas exhaled loudly, spinning around in his chair. "You're exaggerating. I have responsibilities. This deal with Olivia is crucial. If you weren't so caught up in your emotions, you'd see that." Rebecca stiffened. "Caught up in my emotions? I'm pregnant with your child. How could I not be emotional? What do you want me to say?" He snapped, raising his voice in a way he never had before. "Yes, I'm busy. Yes, I rely on Olivia. You want me to throw away a $1 billion opportunity just to sit around picking out cribs?" The words felt like a dagger to her heart. For a moment, the thunder outside seemed to echo her pain. She took a shaky step backward. "I just want my husband," she whispered. "The man who told me he wanted this baby, who used to hold me and promise me the world." Thomas's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it, and Rebecca noticed it was Olivia calling. Without hesitation, he picked up. "Yes," he answered, turning slightly away from Rebecca, as though she didn't exist. That was it, the snap. Something inside Rebecca shattered. The rage, the heartbreak, the humiliation, it all boiled over into a single, life-altering decision. She stepped out of the study, quietly closed the door, and walked to the master bedroom. With trembling hands, she began throwing clothes into a suitcase. Rebecca felt numb as she packed a few essentials: maternity wear, important documents, her prenatal vitamins, and the ultrasound pictures. She paused, looking at the framed photo of her and Thomas on their wedding day. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't allow herself to dwell. She had to leave. Her unborn child's well-being came first. Determined, she wheeled the suitcase to the elevator. Usually, a staff member would assist with the elevator in their luxurious building, but at this hour, no one was around. Every clunk and rattle of the elevator was amplified by her thudding heart. When she reached the lobby, she hurried past the doorman, a kindly older gentleman named Charles, who always greeted her with a smile. He noticed her suitcase and looked concerned. "Everything all right, Miss S. Monroe?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she lied, forcing a tight smile. "Just visiting my parents for a while." He nodded, his brow furrowed. She hailed a taxi in the pouring rain, slid into the back seat, and gave the driver an address in New Jersey, her friend Allison Lee's house, a close confidant she knew wouldn't judge. Once the taxi sped away, Rebecca exhaled a shaky breath. She felt terror and relief simultaneously. She was leaving behind a life of luxury, but also heartbreak and betrayal. Inside the taxi, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Thomas's name lit up. A part of her expected him to chase after her, to beg her to return. But she was done hoping. She let the call go to voicemail. Then she turned off her phone, tears silently rolling down her cheeks as she stared out at the rain-swept city. Allison Lee lived in a modest suburban neighborhood in Newark, a cozy home decorated with warm colors and photographs of her own family. When Rebecca arrived, drenched from the rain, Allison opened the door and enveloped her in a tight hug. "Oh, Becky," Allison murmured, rubbing circles on her back. "I'm so sorry." Rebecca broke down, sobbing into her friend's shoulder. After she calmed down somewhat, they sat in the living room with steaming cups of herbal tea. Rebecca recounted the past months, the suspicions, the missed events, Olivia's looming presence, and Thomas's gradual emotional detachment. Allison's eyes flashed with anger. That man is unbelievable. And that Olivia, I never trusted her. She always had that cunning look. She placed a comforting hand on Rebecca's knee. You're safe here. Stay as long as you need. My home is your home. Over the next week, Rebecca tried to find some semblance of stability. She helped Alison with household chores, took slow walks around the neighborhood to clear her mind, and even tagged along to Alison's community events. The humdrum of suburban life was a welcome change from the suffocating opulence of the penthouse. But the emotional turmoil didn't fade easily. Nights were the worst. Rebecca would often wake in a cold sweat, haunted by nightmares of Thomas and Olivia. She would press a hand to her growing belly, reminding herself that she was fighting for more than just her own heart. She was fighting for her child's future, a future that deserved love, stability, and peace. Meanwhile, Thomas's calls and texts piled up. When Rebecca finally turned her phone on, messages came flooding in. "Where are you? We need to talk. This is crazy. Come home. Don't do anything stupid, remember. You're pregnant. Becky, please, at least let me hear your voice." For days she ignored them, but the messages kept coming, turning from anger to desperation, then to apologies. She was torn. Part of her wanted to hear him out, to cling to the faint hope that her husband might realize the error of his ways. Another part of her burned with bitterness. Why had it taken her leaving for him to show any sign of remorse? One afternoon, as she was resting in the guest room, her phone vibrated again. Another call from Thomas. With a trembling hand, she pressed answer. "What do you want?" she said curtly. There was a pause. Then his voice, low and filled with tension. "Rebecca, where are you?" "I'm worried sick," she scoffed. "Worried about your reputation, perhaps? Or did Olivia King threaten to pull out of your precious deal if you didn't show a little more concern?" His sigh crackled through the line. "No, it's not like that. Please, I know I messed up. I want you to come home. We can work this out. Work this out. You didn't seem interested in that before. Things are different now," he insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. "I realize what I stand to lose. I can't lose you or our child." Rebecca swallowed the lump in her throat. She thought of all the nights she cried herself to sleep, all the times she had begged for his attention, only to be dismissed. "You should have realized that when I was still in the house, Thomas." He fell silent, seemingly at a loss for words. After a few seconds he spoke again, quietly. "Can we at least meet in person? Just talk, please." Rebecca hesitated. She knew it was risky. A single meeting might unravel the shaky resolve she'd built, but a part of her also longed for closure or perhaps an explanation. "Fine," she said after a beat. "Tomorrow. We can meet at the cafe near the old library in Midtown. You have exactly 1 hour." The next day, Rebecca traveled back into New York City by train. She'd wrapped herself in a loose-fitting coat to hide her growing belly, though it was increasingly difficult to do so. A dull anxiety gnawed at her. She braced herself for the onslaught of old memories as she navigated familiar streets. The cafe was a small, quaint spot they used to frequent during their dating days. Rebecca arrived early, settling into a corner table with a view of the door. She sipped ginger tea to calm her queasy stomach. When Thomas walked in, her heart clenched at the sight of him. He looked tired, his once magnetic aura now dimmed by guilt. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Becky," he said, quietly sliding into the seat across from her. He reached for her hand, but she quickly pulled away. A flash of hurt crossed his features. She cut right to the chase. "Say what you need to say," Thomas sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm sorry, I've been a fool. I was so consumed by expanding Monroe Innovations that I lost sight of what truly matters." Rebecca waited, arms folded. She noticed how his eyes flicked to her belly, a flicker of something like concern or regret crossing his face. "I should never have neglected you. I know Olivia looks suspicious, but I swear it's only business." His voice trembled with what seemed like sincerity. "Yes, she's flirtatious, but it's just how she is. I never thought of being unfaithful to you, Becky. That's the truth." Her gaze hardened. "Then why does she act like she's your partner in more than just business? Why has everyone in our social circle whispered behind my back that you two are involved?" Thomas shook his head, rubbing his temples. "Rumors, gossip. She's an essential part of this acquisition deal. It's one of the biggest expansions in tech. We had to court investors, attend parties, sometimes until late at night. It looks bad, I admit, but it was always for the company. For us, a wave of frustration crashed over Rebecca. There's a difference between working on a deal and letting your pregnant wife face humiliating gossip alone. If it was purely business, then why didn't you nip these rumors in the bud? Why didn't you truly reassure me before I walked out?" Thomas lowered his head. "I guess I was arrogant. I figured you'd understand or that it would blow over. And the truth is, I liked the excitement of chasing that massive deal. I forgot to balance my life. I forgot you needed me, and that I needed you too." Silence settled between them. The clink of cups and chatter from other customers felt oddly distant. Rebecca leaned back, arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "Thomas, I'm pregnant with your child. It's not just about me, it's about this baby. You promised me a life of partnership, of a loving family. You left me alone in that penthouse, at events, at an ultrasound appointment, without so much as a phone call. Do you realize how crushed I felt?" His eyes clouded with remorse. "I'm sorry, Becky. I'll do anything to make it right. Come home. We'll see a counselor. I'll scale back on my travels. Please." For a fleeting second, hope fluttered in Rebecca's chest. She studied Thomas's face. Was he truly repentant, or was he just panicking because she finally left? She inhaled, steadying her voice. "I don't know if I can trust you. Not after everything." Thomas reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. "It's a confirmation. I cancelled the rest of my upcoming trips. I told Olivia I'm stepping back from negotiations in London, and I scheduled an appointment at a marriage counselor's office next Tuesday. Please, at least consider giving me a chance." Rebecca glanced at the paper, her throat tightening with emotion. She wanted to believe him, to believe that the man she fell in love with still existed beneath the layers of ambition and neglect. But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. "I need time to think," she said softly, pushing the paper back toward him. "I appreciate this, but I'm not ready to come home." Thomas nodded, blinking away what looked like tears. "I understand. I just want you to know I do love you, Becky. I love our baby, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." She stood up, feeling her chest tighten. "I have to go. I'll be in touch." He rose as well, looking like he wanted to hug her, but he withheld. As Rebecca left the cafe, she fought back tears, her mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. Heartbreak, hope, anger, and a fragile desire for reconciliation. Days turned into weeks. Rebecca remained at Allison's, trying to piece together the broken shards of her life. Thomas's overtures continued. He sent flowers, baby gifts, apology letters. He forwarded her details of cancelled business trips, proof that he was stepping back from the relentless grind. On paper, it seemed like he was truly changing. Yet a part of Rebecca still questioned everything. Then came the twist she never expected, a whisper from another quarter. A friend, someone who worked at a rival tech company, confided in her that Olivia King was notorious for leveraging personal relationships to secure high-stakes deals. According to rumors, she had a pattern: cozy up to powerful men, become indispensable, And once the deal closed, she moved on to her next conquest. Rebecca's heart pounded when she heard this. If it was true, then perhaps Olivia's closeness with Thomas really had been about business. But it still didn't excuse Thomas's negligence, nor did it erase the humiliating rumors that plagued Rebecca for months. To get clarity, Rebecca made a bold move. She contacted Olivia King directly. Finding her number from an old message she'd seen on Thomas's phone, Rebecca called, half expecting to be ignored. Surprisingly, Olivia answered. "Well, if it isn't Miss S. Munro," Olivia said, her British accent dripping with condescension. "To what do I owe this honor?" Rebecca's stomach tightened. She took a steadying breath. "I want the truth, Olivia. Were you involved with my husband beyond business?" A mocking laugh floated through the phone. "Are you really calling to ask that? My dear, if Thomas were cheating on you, would he be so obvious? He's far too smart to jeopardize his precious image that way." Rebecca's grip on the phone tightened. "So, you're claiming nothing happened? Thomas and I have been working together. Yes. We've traveled, we've celebrated. Investors demand a certain level of hospitality, as I'm sure you know. But if you're asking about romance," she paused, and Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. "I don't dip my pen in the company ink." She gave a short, cold laugh, and Thomas never pursued it either. "Believe what you will, darling." The line went dead. Rebecca set the phone down, her mind reeling. Olivia could be lying, but her mocking tone suggested she had no reason to hide if the rumor was indeed false. Had Thomas truly not cheated on her? And if so, how did all of this spiral so badly? The revelation rattled Rebecca. For months, she had believed Thomas was having a sordid affair. While his neglect was real, the actual infidelity might not be. And that changed her perspective on everything. She realized how fear and rumors had eroded her trust, how isolation and loneliness amplified her insecurities. Thomas still bore responsibility. He had chosen to push her aside for business. He had allowed suspicion to fester. But the path to redemption might be more possible than she'd imagined. One evening, she pulled out the list of therapists Thomas had sent her. She sat on Alison's couch, laptop on her knees, reading reviews for each. Something stirred in her heart, curiosity, a glimmer of hope. Maybe she owed it to herself and her unborn child to see if Thomas truly meant to change. She dialed a number. "Hello," she said when a warm voice answered. "I'd like to confirm an appointment. Marriage counseling with Dr. Eva Richards next Tuesday." Rebecca agreed to attend the session, but she remained cautious. She met Thomas at the psychologist's office, a cozy suite adorned with calming artwork and plush armchairs. Soft music played in the background, meant to soothe frazzled nerves. Dr. Eva Richards, a woman with kind brown eyes and an empathetic smile, welcomed them. She offered them water, encouraged them to sit, and asked open-ended questions about their relationship. Rebecca spoke first, recounting the emotional neglect, the missed milestones, and her heartbreak. Thomas listened, head bowed in shame. When it was Thomas's turn, he explained the relentless pressure he felt to expand his company, how it became an all-consuming mission to secure a future for his family, the best hospitals, the best schools for our child, he said. In his eyes, he was protecting them from the poverty he'd known as a child. But he admitted he went about it the wrong way, ignoring his wife's emotional needs and fueling rumors instead of confronting them. Dr. Richards led them through exercises designed to foster empathy. At one point, they held hands, stared into each other's eyes, and spoke honestly about what they felt. Rebecca's tears flowed freely as she whispered, "I felt abandoned." Thomas squeezed her hands and choked out, "I was blind, Becky. I'm so sorry." The session lasted over an hour. By the end, they left with a glimmer of renewed understanding, though forgiveness would take time. Outside, Thomas asked if she would join him for lunch. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. Over soup and salad at a quiet bistro, they spoke more openly than they had in months. Rebecca recounted her fears, the isolation, and the suspicion about Olivia. Thomas apologized repeatedly, clarifying that he'd never intended to cross the line with Olivia, though he acknowledged his behavior invited that misunderstanding. For the first time since she'd left, Rebecca glimpsed the man she fell in love with, a mixture of ambition and vulnerability. When he gently placed a hand on her belly, asking about the baby's progress, she saw genuine concern shining in his eyes. In the following weeks, Rebecca continued staying at Allison's, but she met Thomas for counseling sessions twice a week. They tackled deep-seated issues: Thomas's fear of poverty, Rebecca's longing for emotional security, their struggles with communication. Dr. Richards guided them with patience, praising their willingness to work together. Thomas also made tangible changes. He announced his temporary leave from Monroe Innovations to focus on personal matters. He delegated major responsibilities to a trusted executive team. This decision shocked the tech world. Media outlets buzzed with speculation, but for once, Thomas didn't seem to care about the headlines. Instead, he visited baby stores with Rebecca, helped her pick out a crib, and even accompanied her to a prenatal appointment. Seeing him in the waiting room, holding her hand as the ultrasound wand glided over her belly, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. At each checkup, they heard the steady gallop of the baby's heartbeat. Thomas's gaze would soften, and Rebecca felt a fragile bond rekindling between them. They even started discussing baby names, Thomas suggesting Elijah if it was a boy, after his grandfather, and Rebecca favoring Cassandra if it was a girl, after her late grandmother. However, the path to reconciliation wasn't without hiccups. Rebecca still harbored resentment. She snapped at Thomas for minor things, her anger a residue of the trauma. Thomas, in turn, occasionally relapsed into old habits, sneaking a glance at work emails instead of focusing on her. But these moments grew less frequent as they learned better ways to communicate. Just when it seemed progress was being made, another storm brewed. A tabloid article appeared, insinuating that Thomas had indeed carried on an affair with Olivia King. Anonymous sources claimed they witnessed intimate behavior behind the scenes at conferences. The story spread like wildfire online, fueling social media gossip. Rebecca read the article in horror. She felt her newfound trust falter. Was Olivia lying during that phone call? Was Thomas playing her all along? She confronted him in a heated argument. "They have sources, Thomas. They claim they saw you too." Thomas looked furious. "It's garbage journalism, Becky. Anyone can lie. Olivia and I had a direct conversation yesterday. She told me someone threatened to leak false claims for money. It's pure blackmail." She stared at him, tears brimming. "But how do I know you're telling the truth?" Thomas's voice trembled. "I understand your doubt, but Dr. Richards said we need honesty. So here it is. I never slept with Olivia. I never cheated on you. I'm willing to take a polygraph, release my personal phone records, anything you want to prove it." The sincerity in his eyes, combined with the progress they'd made in therapy, made Rebecca pause. She realized how easy it was for rumors to spiral in high-profile circles, and how naive she might have been to assume tabloids always had the truth. Slowly, the spark of trust reignited. To quash the rumors, Thomas released a public statement. "My wife and I are committed to each other and to our growing family. Any rumors of an affair with Miss Olivia King are completely false. We regret that private matters have become fodder for tabloid speculation." Olivia King, for her part, also issued a short statement denying any personal involvement with Thomas. Her tone was curt and businesslike, but it served its purpose. Over time, public interest moved on. The rumor died down, replaced by the next sensational headline. For Rebecca, seeing Thomas publicly defend their marriage was significant. She felt a sense of validation, something she'd longed for when she was alone in that penthouse, feeling invisible. By the time Rebecca reached her 8th month of pregnancy, her belly had grown round and radiant. Thomas organized a grand baby shower, but with a twist, he insisted on a charity element. Instead of gifts, he requested donations to a local shelter for single mothers. The gesture touched Rebecca deeply, reminding her of the man she once knew, the man who cared about giving back as much as gaining success. Friends and family gathered at a sunlit garden, decorated with pastel balloons and flowers. Even Sarah Davis flew in from Los Angeles. People mingled, played baby-themed games, and took photos with the mum-to-be. Rebecca wore a simple white maternity dress that highlighted her glow. Thomas hovered near her, ensuring she had everything she needed: food, water, a chair whenever she felt tired. His devotion that day radiated sincerity. Watching him laugh with her friends, place protective hands over her belly, and quietly boast about her strength to the guests, Rebecca felt a slow, careful healing in her heart. Though the wounds of the past were deep, they were no longer fresh. She could imagine a future where they continued to work on their marriage, day by day, for the sake of each other and their child. 3 weeks before her due date, Rebecca went into labor unexpectedly. She woke in the middle of the night with sharp pains. Thomas, half asleep, jolted awake at her cries and immediately sprang into action. He called their doctor, grabbed the hospital bag they'd prepared, and helped Rebecca into the car. During the tense drive to the hospital, she clung to his hand. Despite the pain, she felt comforted by his presence, recalling how different things had been just months ago when she feared facing motherhood alone. Now, though uncertain, she believed in his promise to stand by her side. The labor was long and intense, lasting over 14 hours. Thomas stayed in the delivery room the entire time. He paced, offered ice chips, massaged her back, and whispered words of encouragement. At one point, when Rebecca's contractions grew nearly unbearable, she saw tears in his eyes. "I'm here," he kept repeating. "I'm here." Finally, at dawn, their son was born. The doctor placed the squirming newborn on Rebecca's chest. He let out a hearty cry, and Thomas burst into tears, pressing kisses to Rebecca's forehead and murmuring a stream of thank yous to her, to fate, to everything that led them to this moment. Rebecca, tears flowing, looked at their son with awe. He was a tiny miracle, a living testament that love could persevere through heartbreak if given a chance to heal. They named him Elijah Monroe, honoring Thomas's grandfather. In that instant, all the pain, the betrayal, the sorrow, they seemed eclipsed by an overwhelming joy. They were a family. In the weeks that followed, adjusting to parenthood was a challenge. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the emotional roller coaster of caring for a newborn tested them further. But this time, Thomas did not vanish behind a mountain of work. He woke up for night feedings, changed diapers, and paced the floor with baby Elijah when he was fussy. He insisted on being a hands-on father. Rebecca often watched him in quiet wonder. She saw him gently cradle Elijah, humming lullabies she never knew he remembered. She felt gratitude blossoming. Though the scars from the past lingered, they were healing. The house, once a stage for heartbreak, now filled with the coos and cries of a new life, reminding them daily of what truly mattered. Their marriage wasn't perfect, it never could be, but they were learning to navigate conflict with honesty, to prioritize communication over assumptions. Dr. Richards continued to guide them through postnatal sessions, ensuring they addressed any lingering resentment. It was a slow process, but one they embarked on willingly. One evening, after putting Elijah to bed, they curled up on the couch together. Thomas slid his arm around Rebecca's shoulders, pulling her close. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of peace, earned, tested, and real. Rebecca looked up at him, eyes shining with emotion. "I never thought we'd make it back here," she admitted, voice trembling. "There were times I thought I'd be raising Elijah on my own." Thomas kissed her softly, a gesture of both apology and devotion. "I promise," he whispered, "I will never let you feel alone again." And for the first time, Rebecca truly believed him. Thank you for joining us on this turbulent journey, from glittering penthouse dreams to shattered hearts, and, finally, toward the hope of a renewed love. Rebecca's decision to leave was the catalyst that awakened Thomas to the peril of losing everything that mattered most. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, resilience, and redemption, reminding us that even the mightiest storms can sometimes lead to clearer, brighter skies if both sides are willing to work for it.
They say money can buy anything except anonymity from the internet. One crisp summer morning, billionaire industrialist David Harrington thought he'd scored the perfect getaway with a bewitching companion half his age. Sunlit waves shimmered behind them in an Instagram post he never dreamed would shatter his life. Within hours, a fiery storm of comments erupted, accusing the mysterious woman of being someone far more dangerous than she appeared. The rumors spiraled into a full-blown expose that threatened not just David's crumbling marriage, but also his image and legacy. In a single click, the world learned that secrets, no matter how well funded, rarely remain buried. David Harrington had always been a man who commanded attention the instant he walked into a room. At 6 feet 2 inches, with tailored suits that seemed to drape his athletic frame flawlessly, he radiated a polished self-assurance cultivated over decades of hard work and strategic gambles. Born in Chicago to a middle-class family, David displayed an early flair for numbers and negotiation. By the time he was in college, he'd already built 2 small businesses, one reselling refurbished laptops out of his dorm, and another importing artisanal leather wallets from Italy. He was a hustler in the best sense of the word, unrelenting in his pursuit of prosperity. When he turned 25, David took his biggest risk yet. He convinced an angel investor named Richard Carmichael, a man revered for his savvy in emerging markets, to pour $500,000 into a software automation startup David co-founded. It was an audacious move, especially in a market saturated with bigger, more established players. But David's persuasion worked. Within 18 months, the startup was acquired by a larger tech conglomerate, netting David his first major fortune. It was the start of an illustrious career that would see him founding or funding a series of successful ventures into technology, real estate, and even renewable energy. By his mid-30s, David Harrington was wealthy beyond imagination, yet his ambition burned brighter. He was rarely satisfied. Gone were the days of renting modest apartments and living on fast food. He now presided over a sprawling empire, complete with offices in New York, London, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. He jetted around the globe for business deals, indulging in the high-life trappings, private yachts membership at exclusive clubs, and a mansion perched atop the Hollywood Hills with a ski-line view that glittered like diamonds at night. But hidden beneath the aura of success was a restless void. He was married, yes, to the beautiful and accomplished Sarah Whitmore. They met at a charity event in Los Angeles, bonding over a shared passion for philanthropy. Sarah, an Ivy League-educated lawyer turned environmental activist, had grown up in a similarly middle-class background. She understood David's drive and matched him in intellect. For a while they seemed the ultimate power couple, publicly philanthropic, privately fierce in their love and ambitions. However, time and relentless pursuit of more money placed stress cracks in their marriage. David's constant travel, late-night negotiations, and if rumors were to be believed, unstoppable appetite for new experiences, all weighed heavily on Sarah. As David's orbit expanded, she found herself increasingly sidelined, overshadowed by the gravitational pull of his ambitions. Even the philanthropic causes they once championed together were neglected. David wrote the checks, but rarely bothered to attend the galas or volunteer events anymore. By the time he was in his early 40s, the heart of their relationship had eroded, replaced by polite tolerance and carefully orchestrated public appearances. That was the environment in which David would eventually make a series of decisions, culminating in the scandal that would rock his world. Fueled by ego and weary of the stale comfort his marriage had devolved into, he sought excitement elsewhere. He believed he was untouchable, convinced his well-oiled team of advisors and the iron curtain of wealth could conceal any indiscretions. But David Harrington was about to learn one of life's harshest truths in the digital era. Every secret has a lifespan. All it takes is a single post for an empire's pristine facade to come crashing down. Sarah Whitmore Harrington was no stranger to adversity. Raised by a single mother in a modest Chicago neighborhood, she thrived academically, eventually securing a full scholarship to Columbia University. While her classmates carried designer purses and took spring breaks in Europe, Sarah juggled part-time jobs at coffee shops and university libraries. She took pride in her self-reliance, never shying away from hard work and rigorous study. By her mid-20s, Sarah was practicing corporate law at a prestigious Manhattan firm. She was brilliant, resilient, and notably empathetic. Those qualities caught the attention of an internal pro bono committee, which led her to champion several environmental cases against big corporations. Her compassion for the underdog and her deep sense of justice made her a formidable foe in legal negotiations. She even won a high-profile lawsuit that forced a major chemical company to pay millions in damages to a marginalized community. The victory made headlines, and from that moment, Sarah became recognized not just as a skilled lawyer, but as a warrior for ethical responsibility. That was how she met David at a black tie fundraiser in Los Angeles, where he presented a sizable check to the environmental organization she represented. The sparks flew instantly. In him, she saw a titan with an innate gift for making money and an equally fervent philanthropic side, an individual who could potentially reshape industries for the better. In her, he saw a steadfast spirit, beautiful both inside and out, and a partner whose intellect could match his. Their courtship was whirlwind. They dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, attended exclusive events, and traveled abroad to meet potential charity partners in places like Nairobi and Mumbai. Within 6 months, they were married in a lavish beach ceremony in Maui, complete with dignitaries, celebrities, and the who's who of venture capital in attendance. However, the transition from newlyweds to a stable marriage was rocky. David's businesses, spread across multiple sectors, demanded constant attention and travel. Meanwhile, Sarah transitioned from corporate law to running her own not-for-profit legal consultancy for environmental issues, an endeavor that required significant energy and focus. They saw each other less and less. The times they did manage to reconnect were overshadowed by David's phone calls, emails, and text notifications. Despite the cracks in their relationship, Sarah believed she still knew David better than anyone else. She sensed when he was exhausted, recognized when his bravado was merely a cover for deeper anxieties. She also recognized as his success soared to new heights that he was falling into certain patterns, seeking novelty, losing interest in things that once mattered, constantly pushing boundaries. But she never quite dared to voice her growing suspicions. She wanted to preserve their public image, and more critically, she didn't want to face the reality that her husband might be cheating. Then the subtle shifts started. David became secretive about his phone, quickly changing screens when she walked by. He started going on business trips to places that made no sense, or at times that were uncharacteristic for the industries he worked in. Once Sarah found a diamond bracelet in his study desk, one that was clearly not for her, as she had never once expressed interest in that style, nor had he gifted her something similar in years. She brushed it off, attributing it to a possible gift for a female investor or sponsor. But deep down, she suspected. Sarah thought about confronting him multiple times, yet her pride held her back. In her mind, relationships were built on honesty and trust, but confronting David without proof felt like a betrayal of her self-respect. She wanted certainty. She needed to be sure. In the quiet corners of her soul, she wondered if it might be easier to look away, to focus on her philanthropic work, and to let David chase his illusions. After all, they maintained a semblance of stability. They weren't short on money. Her beloved mother was comfortable living in a gorgeous townhouse that Sarah and David financed. On the surface, her life seemed perfect. But as the months rolled on, Sarah felt a gathering storm, an anxiety that gnawed at her. Something in her marriage and David was shifting. For all her accomplishments, for all her unwavering character, she was powerless to stop whatever was happening. A sense of impending disaster loomed. She could almost hear the faint thunderclap on the horizon. She just didn't know how or when it would strike, only that it was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. David Harrington first laid eyes on Layla St. James at a private art exhibit in Soho. The event was one of those exclusive gatherings of the ultra-wealthy and avant-garde, a place to see and be seen. She stood in front of a painting, a swirl of neon colors, something abstract and disorienting, and seemed lost in thought. She wore a simple yet elegant emerald green dress, her tawny hair falling in loose waves down her back. David was immediately intrigued by her aura of quiet confidence. He approached her fully expecting that easy spark he often found in conversations. Layla, however, surprised him. She greeted him with polite warmth, but spoke with a self-assuredness and intellectual depth that caught him off guard. She was not overly impressed by his status or money. At least she didn't show it in the usual fawning way. Instead, she asked him questions about his philanthropic endeavors, referencing a literacy program in Southeast Asia that David's foundation had once funded. Few people outside his close circle even knew about that. It was an obscure project, overshadowed by his more flashy contributions. Fascinated by her knowledge, he pressed further. Layla revealed she was an art historian by training, had worked in Europe's auction circuit, and recently moved to New York to pursue her own gallery aspirations. She claimed she had grown tired of the pretentiousness in traditional art circles and wanted to start a space that embraced both established and emerging artists. Over a cocktail in the exhibit's VIP lounge, Layla recounted travel stories from her time in Paris, how she'd negotiated million-dollar deals for rare impressionist works. Her voice dripped with a delicate, almost musical accent. David couldn't quite place a mix, she said, from traveling around the world. In the weeks that followed, they exchanged numbers. David found himself texting Layla at odd hours, discussing art-world politics and eventually drifting into flirtation. Layla reciprocated, sprinkling their conversations with subtle compliments and innuendo that kept David on his toes. It felt like a dance one that David had not experienced in a long time. Sarah had once been his intellectual equal, But now their discussions were overshadowed by property deals, lawsuits, and superficial gatherings. Layla offered something new, something fresh. Their first real date came under the guise of a business meeting at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Midtown. David told himself he was merely exploring philanthropic collaboration, maybe funding an art initiative Layla had proposed. But by dessert, they were lost in each other's eyes. A wave of guilt threatened to crash over David, but he quelled it with a glass of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, rationalizing that he deserved happiness. Life was too short, and he had worked too hard. If he couldn't indulge once in a while, what was the point of all this success? Days turned into weeks, and he found every excuse to see Layla. A hotel suite at the Pierre, a weekend in the Hamptons. David claimed he had an urgent real estate matter to attend to. Layla was always there, radiant, engaging, confident in her allure. But there was something else about her, a certain mystery that David couldn't pinpoint. She rarely spoke about her family or past relationships. She was cagey whenever he asked about the specifics of her work in Europe. His curiosity was piqued, but the thrill of their clandestine encounters overshadowed any red flags. In private moments, Layla would talk about the future, teasing a world where they might be more public in their romance. David smiled, uncertain if he could ever cross that line. He was still tethered by a marriage that he had not fully admitted was over. Yet Layla's world was intoxicating and like a moth drawn to flame. He ignored the risk. The more David's desire grew, the more brazen he became about their affair. Eventually, a reckless idea took shape in his mind. He had a beachside villa in Belize that was rarely used. Perhaps a little tropical escape was just what they needed. Sun, sand, and secrecy far from prying eyes. Layla loved the idea, squealing with excitement at the notion of turquoise waters and private cabanas. They decided on a date, making hush-hush travel plans through David's private jet. In David's mind, this was a contained fantasy, a secret paradise sealed away from the rest of his life. No one would ever know. They would be safe to indulge, if only for a few days. He should have remembered that secrets don't stay buried forever. And with social media's insatiable appetite for drama, a single misstep could set off a chain reaction he'd never see coming. The villa in Belize was a pristine haven surrounded by palm trees, with a private stretch of powdery white sand extending into azure waters. It was the kind of place people only see in glossy travel magazines, one David rarely got to enjoy, thanks to his busy schedule. Layla's eyes sparkled when they arrived. She ran to the ocean's edge, letting the warm waves lap at her feet. David watched her heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Somewhere in the recesses of his conscience, a small voice asked, "Is this worth it?" He silenced it, enticed by the vision of Layla on the beach. Each morning they lounged under canopied daybeds, sipping tropical cocktails and listening to the rhythmic crash of waves. David felt more alive than he had in years. He indulged in Layla's laughter, her spontaneous dances in the sand, the ways she made him forget about corporate boardrooms and stifling responsibilities. This was freedom, no obligations, no routine, just the two of them enjoying life's simple pleasures. On the second day, after a lazy breakfast of fresh mangoes and coffee, Layla teased David with a challenge. "Let's take a picture, something special to remember this trip by." David hesitated. He had always maintained a strict no social media posts policy when it came to his private affairs. But the sunlight was dancing off the ocean, and Layla looked radiant in her turquoise bikini. She draped herself across a beach lounger, beckoning him closer. David relented, pulling out his phone. He snapped a few pictures of them together. Layla's head on his chest, the glimmering ocean behind them. Laughing, they flipped through the shots, choosing their favorites. Layla posted a couple of photos on her own discreet account set to private. She had only a handful of followers, mostly art world acquaintances, she said. David shrugged, telling himself that a handful of people with no ties to his life wouldn't make a difference. Still, he felt a pang of anxiety at the possibility of any slip. Emboldened by the day's carefree vibe, David grew reckless. Late that evening, after a lavish dinner prepared by the villa's private chef, Layla pressed herself against him and giggled. "Let's show off just a bit. Let's make them jealous." She grabbed his phone and teased him with an Instagram story post. "Just a quick shot of the sunset," she said, with a silhouette of them toasting wine glasses. She promised it wouldn't give away too much. "No faces, no location tags," she whispered. Caught up in the evening's romantic intoxication, David acquiesced. He posted it. The immediate response from his followers was mild. People admired the sunset, the luxurious atmosphere. But within minutes, eagle-eyed fans began to notice small details, the shape of a woman's figure in the reflection of the glass door, the second wine glass in David's hand. A few commented, enjoying a romantic getaway. David, others posted heart emojis and asked, "Where's Sarah?" That was the first red flag. David ignored it, telling himself it was harmless speculation. The next morning, in a haze of euphoria, David made a grave mistake. While Layla was frolicking in the waves, he snapped a candid shot of her, capturing her face in profile, then posted it to his main feed with a cryptic caption, "A moment of peace in paradise." He truly believed it was ambiguous enough that no one would identify her. He never tagged her account, never mentioned her name. But the internet has a way of connecting the dots. Within minutes, the post garnered thousands of likes. Then came the comments, some supportive, many curious, a few, laced with suspicion. A handful of David's close friends texted him directly. "Who is she?" Some used winking emojis, half joking. Others were more direct, worried that this could blow back on him if Sarah saw it. Unperturbed, David turned off his phone notifications, wanting to stay in their bubble of paradise a little while longer. It was on the final day of their trip that reality began to intrude. Unbeknownst to David, a tabloid blogger had recognized Layla's face from a rumor that had circulated in certain high society circles, an art dealer with a dubious past, rumored to seduce wealthy clients, rumored to have left Europe under a cloud of scandal. The blogger had ties to gossip circles across the globe and had access to hush-hush sources in the European art scene. By the time David and Layla boarded his private jet for the return flight to New York, the blogger was already working on an exposé cross-referencing images and combing through digital footprints. The seeds of disaster were planted, and neither David nor Layla had any clue that a social media storm was brewing. They touched down in New York that evening, stepping back into a world that would soon turn on them with alarming speed. For David, the beach vacation was a blissful memory. For the internet, it became the catalyst for a scandal that would reshape everything he thought he knew about his mistress, his marriage, and even himself. When David checked his phone after landing, he noticed a barrage of missed calls and frantic texts, primarily from his closest business associates and his public relations officer, Jacqueline Nguyen. His heart pounded as he glanced at the notifications. Typically, such a flurry of calls indicated a major development, a collapsed deal, maybe a crisis in one of his overseas offices. But as he skimmed through them, he realized the panic was personal, not professional. "David, call me ASAP." One text from Jacqueline read, "We have a problem on Instagram." Confused and apprehensive, he dialed Jacqueline's number. She picked up immediately, her voice strained. "David, you need to delete that post right now," she blurted before he could speak. "Calm down, Jackie." He attempted trying to maintain composure. "What's going on?" She launched into a rapid-fire explanation. "Your post with that woman on the beach." Someone recognized her. Comments are exploding. There's a rumor swirling that she's a con artist who allegedly scammed an art collector in Paris. People are sharing screenshots, old articles, everything. It's going viral. They're calling her the art world grifter. This is beyond just an affair rumor. This could turn into a full-blown scandal. David's head spun. He had braced himself for gossip about a potential mistress, but allegations of criminal activity took the situation to an entirely different level. He ended the call immediately, opened Instagram, and gaped at the flood of comments. Many asked, "Is that Layla St. James?" Others claimed she was wanted for questioning in Europe. Some linked to half-baked investigative pieces from obscure blogs. And then there were the moral judgments, David Harrington. How could you cheat on your wife with a criminal respect lost? Hypocrite. A real philanthropist wouldn't be with a con artist. Layla, who was seated beside him in his chauffeured car, scrolled through her own phone. He could see the color drain from her face. "David, we need to talk," she whispered, voice shaky. Not willing to address the situation in the car, he texted his driver to head to one of his discreet penthouse properties in Manhattan. He couldn't go home to his mansion. Sarah was likely there, and a confrontation now would be disastrous. Layla's expression was that of panic fused with indignation. "I don't understand why they're saying these things," she kept muttering. "I'm not a criminal." She tried to show him what she claimed were legitimate references from her past employers, though David barely glanced at them. Once they arrived at the penthouse, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Layla collapsed onto a plush sofa. David paced phone in hand, reading through messages from colleagues, PR consultants, and even lawyers. His empire was built on a carefully curated image of competence and ethics. Any hint of scandal could harm investor confidence. And the fact that Sarah, widely respected in legal and philanthropic circles, might soon find out, was another ticking bomb. "I need you to tell me everything," David demanded, voice taut with urgency. "Why are people calling you a grifter? Were you accused of something in Europe? Tell me now, Layla." She exhaled, trembling. "I never scammed anyone. I was involved with a wealthy French collector. Yes, but I left because he was controlling and abusive. He spread rumors about me to cover his tracks. I never faced any charges. None of it is true." David studied her, trying to gauge the sincerity of her words. He had believed her wholeheartedly until this moment, but now his instincts sounded alarms. Something in her eyes. Was it fear, or was it guilt? The swirling chaos of the moment made it hard to read. A sense of betrayal and dread took hold of him. He realized that even if Layla was innocent, the public didn't care. Gossip and scandal had already latched onto them. The internet feeds on controversy, and they had served it up on a silver platter. The damage might already be done. Over the next few hours, David's crisis management team mobilized. He engaged his top-notch legal counsel, pressing them to craft a statement denying any criminal association. Jacqueline orchestrated a digital damage control strategy, locking down comments, removing the offending post, and issuing official disclaimers that any claims about Layla's criminal background were unsubstantiated rumors. But the internet had already taken screenshots. The post lived on in countless retweets and reshares. Worse still, the mainstream media was picking it up now. A celebrity gossip show ran a segment featuring the blurred-out images of David and Layla on the beach with a dramatic voiceover billionaire, David Harrington's rumored mistress, international con artist, or misunderstood muse. Speculative headlines mushroomed across tabloids, often accompanied by pictures of Sarah, his wronged wife, looking stoic and poised at past charity events. On top of everything, phone calls from Sarah began lighting up David's screen. He couldn't bring himself to answer. His mind whirled in panic, trying to figure out how to spin this. He composed text after text to Sarah, erasing them before sending any. There was no easy way to explain. Perhaps the best he could do was beg for her forgiveness and attempt some sort of damage limitation. David Layla said softly, breaking the tense silence. "I need you to believe me. I'm not who they say I am." He looked at her, swallowing the lump in his throat. "We'll figure this out." He managed, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. But the question that truly haunted him was, had he been duped? And if so, was it just by a cunning seductress, or also by his own naive desire for excitement and novelty? The answer wouldn't remain hidden for long. The internet had taken hold of this scandal, and soon even darker revelations would surface, forcing David to confront secrets far more devastating than an affair. While David and Layla tried to contain the inferno in Manhattan, Sarah Harrington was at home, feeling as though the ground had opened beneath her feet. Initially, she had ignored the handful of texts from friends, hinting at David's suspicious Instagram post. She was used to rumors. But then her best friend, Monica Alvarez, sent a message that rattled her. "Please check the tabloids." "I'm so sorry, Sarah." With shaky hands, Sarah clicked a link Monica had forwarded. She saw David's Instagram post, the silhouette of a woman on a beach, and the avalanche of salacious comments and allegations. Her first reaction was numbness, an eerie calm that spread through her limbs. She had suspected David might be unfaithful, but seeing it unfold publicly was a different kind of pain. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. It was her mother, distressed and confused about the swirling rumors. Embarrassment flooded Sarah, a hot flush crawling up her cheeks. She assured her mother she was fine, even though her heart felt as if it were cracking in half. She forced herself to remain steady, telling her mother not to believe everything she read online. But the numbness soon gave way to anger, then heartbreak, then an odd sense of relief. At least now the rumors were in the open. No more doubts, no more illusions. She spent the next few hours pacing the living room, rereading old messages from David, analyzing their marriage from every angle. She felt a mixture of betrayal and odd detachment, as though she were hovering above herself, watching it all unfold from a distance. A short while later, David's chauffeur arrived at the mansion, dropping off a large black envelope. Sarah took it, opened it, and found legal documents inside, some half-baked statements from David's attorneys, disclaimers about the alleged mistress's background, and an apologetic note that ended with, "Please do not speak to the press. I will explain everything." There was no real apology, no admission of guilt. Just corporate-sounding instructions. It was like receiving a memo from a CEO to a subordinate, rather than a heartfelt message from a husband to his wife. Furious, she called David multiple times, but each attempt went to voicemail. She left a single message. "You owe me an explanation. David, I'm not some PR problem to be handled." Then she hung up, refusing to try again. That evening, as she attempted to navigate the swirling confusion, she received another unexpected visitor. Michael Whitmore, her cousin and fellow attorney, who also worked for a prestigious Los Angeles firm. Michael was in New York on business and had seen the online furore. He arrived unannounced, a supportive presence Sarah desperately needed. They sat in the living room, the mansion feeling too large, too grand for the gloom enveloping it. Sarah poured them both glasses of wine, her hands trembling ever so slightly. She recounted the situation, her suspicions, the damning Instagram post, the rumors about the mistress's criminal past. She felt exposed, humiliated. Michael listened patiently, asking pointed questions. "So this woman Layla might be a con artist," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "Do we know if it's true?" Sarah shrugged. "I don't know anything anymore. I thought I knew David, but now I'm not so sure." Michael offered a thoughtful nod. "Look, Sarah, I can help you. Legally. We can figure out your options, whether it's a separation, a divorce, or simply negotiations for your protection. You shouldn't trust his attorneys. They'll protect him first." Sarah sighed, leaning back into the sofa's cushions. "I appreciate that, but I need time to think. My marriage is on the line, and if this woman really is dangerous, I don't want to rush into any decisions I'll regret." Michael placed his hand over hers. "I understand. But be cautious. Men like David with power and money can become unpredictable under pressure. Do what you must to protect yourself emotionally, legally, financially." That night, Sarah tried to sleep, but nightmares plagued her images of David and Layla on a beach, swirling tabloids and faceless gossipers pointing fingers at her. The next morning, she decided she wouldn't be silent. If David wouldn't provide clarity, she would find it on her own. She scheduled a meeting with her own legal advisors, ignoring the suggestion in David's letter to remain quiet. She reached out to her charitable partners, confirming that she would continue her activism work, regardless of the scandal. The last thing she needed was for her philanthropic efforts to be overshadowed by her husband's affair. Amid the emotional turmoil, a flicker of her old resolve appeared. Sarah refused to let David's betrayal define her. If anything, it fortified her determination. If the woman in the scandal truly was a con artist, Sarah intended to expose the lies. And if the rumors were false, she would force David to explain why he had put her through this mortifying ordeal. From that point on, Sarah began her own quiet investigation. Friends in the art world, acquaintances in legal networks across Europe, she reached out to anyone who might have a lead on Layla St. James. She had no illusions that discovering the truth would fix her marriage, but at least she wouldn't be a passive spectator to her own humiliation. Little did she know her search for answers would set off the next wave of revelations, drawing her into a labyrinth of secrets deeper and more twisted than she could have ever imagined. Back at David's penthouse, tension hung in the air like a stagnant fog. Layla paced the living room, her phone constantly buzzing with text messages and calls. She ignored most, focusing instead on David, who was huddled over his laptop in a makeshift war room arrangement with his PR team via video conference. The official statements they had released weren't silencing the rumors. If anything, the chatter online seemed to grow louder, especially on niche art world forums. Jacqueline's voice crackled through the laptop speakers. "David, we have to address these allegations head-on. We found some references to Layla's possible involvement with a French collector named Jean-Louis Moreau. He's rumored to have lost a significant sum purchasing forgeries from an unknown intermediary, someone described as an attractive American woman. Some people are linking that story to Layla. We need to refute this or confirm it." "Refute it." Layla interjected, indignation flaring in her eyes. It's a smear campaign by a bitter ex. I've told David this already. David sighed. Do we have any evidence that you didn't do these things? Layla. Something official. Legal documents proving your innocence. She glowered, crossing her arms. I never faced formal charges. That's all the proof I have. Jacqueline's voice softened. That's not enough for the court of public opinion. They want something concrete. With a heavy sigh, David ended the call, promising to regroup later. He turned to face Layla, who was hugging herself defensively. I need the truth, he said quietly. I'm not accusing you, but if there's any detail you left out, I need to know. Her eyes flickered. Then she told him her story. Layla claimed she had indeed worked with Jean-Louis Moreau, one of France's most influential collectors, who hired her to help him scout and acquire valuable pieces. According to Layla, Jean-Louis was arrogant and manipulative, eventually pressuring her into a toxic affair. As she tried to distance herself professionally and personally, Jean-Louis began to sabotage her reputation, planting rumors of forgery and fraud. Layla insisted she had zero involvement in any wrongdoing and fled Europe after receiving threats from Jean-Louis' associates. She'd been attempting to rebuild her life in New York, severing all ties with that dark chapter. David listened, half wanting to believe her. The story was plausible enough. Rich men had used their influence to destroy someone's reputation before. But a nagging doubt remained. Layla was still omitting details. What about the rumors you drugged him and stole money? David asked, referencing a particularly sensational claim circulating online. Her cheeks reddened. Utter lies. Fabricated. I don't do drugs. I hardly even drink. I've never stolen a cent from anyone in my life. Don't you see, he's punishing me because I left him. David studied her trembling lip, the tears welling in her eyes. He wanted to comfort her, to accept her story at face value. But the stakes were too high. His empire was in jeopardy, and if Layla was hiding something, the fallout could be catastrophic. Yet the thought of losing her, the excitement she brought into his life, filled him with dread. So he decided to proceed cautiously, choosing to believe her for the moment, but resolved to do his own thorough checks. He called in favors from private investigators he had used in corporate deals. Within hours, they began scouring European legal records, court documents, and any traces of Layla's past, all while David prepared for the next wave of media scrutiny. The scandal showed no signs of abating. Then, in a surprising twist, David's phone rang with a call from none other than Jean-Louis Moreau himself. A few months prior, David had made casual acquaintance with Moreau at a Monaco charity event. Now the French collector was reaching out directly, presumably, to discuss the fiasco. With Layla fidgeting nervously nearby, David accepted the call. On speaker, Jean-Louis' accented voice flowed smoothly. Ah, Monsieur Harrington. I see we have a common acquaintance. David cleared his throat. Apparently so. I'd like to get to the bottom of this. You're aware of the rumors. A condescending chuckle crackled over the speaker. Rumors, yes. But they are not rumors, monsieur. The woman you call Layla St. James, if that's her real name, defrauded me. She introduced me to forged artwork, manipulated me emotionally, then disappeared with large commissions. I have evidence. I attempted legal action, but she slipped away. Layla blanched, shaking her head vehemently at David. David pressed. She claims you invented these lies because she ended a personal relationship with you. A harsh laugh erupted from Jean-Louis. Personal relationship? She seduced me for one purpose: to gain access to my network and my finances. I warn you, Harrington, this is a dangerous woman. She is skilled at deception. If you continue to involve yourself with her, your name, your empire, both will burn. The call ended abruptly. Layla broke into tears, insisting Jean-Louis was lying, that he was the manipulator. David stood there, torn. On one hand, he despised Jean-Louis's smug tone and recognized how men of power often rewrite history to blame women. On the other, the man's conviction was chilling. Could it all be true? David's private investigators would soon deliver a preliminary report, but the emotional stakes were skyrocketing. If Layla was innocent, David would stand by her. If she was guilty, he risked his fortune, his reputation, everything. And all the while, Sarah loomed in the background, her silence perhaps more threatening than any media outlet. That night, David slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of forging art and forging love, unable to discern which illusions were real. Little did he know the truth would be more complicated and more shocking than he could ever anticipate. By the following morning, David's investigators had sent a cryptic message. "We have substantial findings. Meeting recommended." He arranged for them to come to the penthouse, carefully scheduling it when Layla would be out. She had departed earlier to clear her head, though David wondered if she was actually meeting someone else. Just after noon, two stoic men in suits arrived, introducing themselves as Morgan Harris and Philip Zhao. David led them into the study, shutting the door behind them. Their expressions were grim. Morgan began. "Mr. Harrington, we've identified two separate legal dockets in Paris and Brussels that involve an American woman with a similar profile to Ms. St. James. The name used was not Layla St. James, but Linda McPherson." Same initials, L.M. Philip continued. The charges were dropped in one case and settled out of court in another. Both involved allegations of art fraud and misrepresentation. The documents list an unidentified male accomplice. David leaned forward, his pulse pounding. "Are we sure this is the same woman?" Morgan nodded. "We have a 78% facial recognition match between photos from archived news articles and the images you provided us of Ms. St. James. A strong likelihood it's her." A nauseating dread coursed through David's veins. "Any sign of Jean-Louis Moreau's involvement?" Philip replied. "He's mentioned in the Brussels docket as a complaining witness. The details were sealed, but we suspect a settlement was reached behind closed doors." David sank into his chair, his mind a kaleidoscope of betrayal and rage. He thought of confronting Layla, but a text on his phone interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Unknown number. "If you want to keep certain secrets from your wife and the public, it'll cost you $5 million. Wire instructions to follow." Accompanying the text was a single photograph, a candid shot of David and Layla in an intimate moment on the Belize beach, far more revealing than anything posted on social media. Clearly, someone had been photographing them. The angle suggested a drone or a long-range camera. And now they wanted money. David clenched his jaw. "I'm being blackmailed," he growled, showing Morgan and Philip the text. They exchanged worried looks, cautioning David not to make any hasty moves. This could be linked to Ms. St. James's alleged accomplice, Morgan offered. "We've seen this pattern before." Seething, David dismissed them. He needed a plan. A quiet hush money payment would only encourage more extortion down the line. Yet ignoring the threat could lead to even greater exposure. And the worst part was the growing suspicion that Layla herself might be part of this scheme, another elaborate con. But a flicker of doubt lingered. Perhaps Layla truly was a victim, and her old accomplice was extorting them both. He decided he needed to corner Layla that very evening. No more half-truths or evasion. He wanted her entire story. If she lied or faltered, he'd cut her off and let the legal system do its worst. But if she persuaded him of her innocence, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could face this together. Hours later, Layla returned. David wasted no time. "We need to talk," he said curtly, leading her into the study. She looked apprehensive, eyes darting to the closed door. He showed her the blackmail text and the incriminating photo. He then presented the investigative report, the name Linda McPherson, the out-of-court settlements. With every piece of information, Layla's face paled further. When he finished, an uneasy silence settled. Layla's lips quivered. Then she began to speak, voice trembling. "I'm not Linda McPherson. That was my sister." A new tale spilled forth, each revelation more shocking than the last. Layla insisted she had a twin sister raised separately after a messy divorce in her childhood. The sister was the one who got entangled with Jean-Louis, forging art and leveraging Layla's identity. Layla claimed she tried to help her sister out of the mess, but it spiraled beyond control. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I fled to America to escape that chaos. My sister threatened to drag me down with her. I changed my name legally to distance myself from her record. David, I swear I've never defrauded anyone. I thought you'd never understand, so I kept it hidden." David's mind reeled. The idea of a twin, a doppelganger who could have orchestrated these crimes, sounded outrageous, but not impossible. Layla sobbed, claiming her sister was the blackmailer, the one who had been snapping secret photos and demanding money. "She's punishing me for leaving her behind, for not bailing her out again." The story was so elaborate, so twisted. David's gut wrenched with conflicting emotions. The puzzle pieces fit a little too well, yet Layla's tears seemed genuine. He remembered how she had always been vague about her family, how frightened she seemed whenever he asked about her past. Could this all be real? Wrestling with his doubts, David found himself making a decision based on a precarious blend of logic and emotion. "If what you're saying is true, we need proof," he said, voice stern. "We'll involve my investigators. We'll find your sister, and we'll end this blackmail." Layla nodded, relieved. "Whatever it takes. I'll do anything." A fragile truce formed between them that night. David, driven by a potent mix of fear, pride, and infatuation, chose to believe Layla at least temporarily. He vowed to protect her from the blackmailer, from the swirling rumors, from everything. Yet in the darkness of the penthouse, as Layla slept fitfully in the next room, David stared out the window at the glowing city lights, wondering if he'd just made the greatest mistake of his life. While David grappled with the twin sister revelation, Sarah conducted her own inquiry, determined to uncover the truth about Layla St. James. Through her legal network, she managed to contact a renowned French attorney named René Fournier, who had once handled a high-profile art fraud case involving Jean-Louis Moreau. Via a series of lengthy email exchanges, Sarah pieced together a confounding puzzle. According to René, there had indeed been an American woman at the center of the Moreau scandal. Someone who used multiple aliases, among them Linda and Layla. Official documents were sealed, but rumors suggested the woman had an accomplice, possibly a family member. René also hinted that the entire fiasco nearly extended into a broader European crime syndicate. But before any formal charges could stick, the woman vanished. Moreau had enough influence to keep the scandal out of mainstream news, presumably to save face. but the rumor mill churned relentlessly behind closed doors. Sarah's instincts told her that David's mistress had some connection to that case, but she wanted concrete proof. She scrolled through obscure websites, reading half-legible Google translations of French tabloids looking for any mention of sisters or twins. Then she stumbled on a small blog post from years ago that mentioned a sibling duo suspected of art forgery, one rumored to be involved with Moreau. The post cited no official documents, but the narrative was eerily similar to Layla's story. Frustrated, yet fueled by this partial validation, Sarah pressed further. She reached out to an old law school acquaintance in Brussels, who was now a mid-level judicial clerk. Within a day, the acquaintance confirmed that sealed records existed involving a Linda Macpherson, but he couldn't access details without risking his career. He did, however, confirm the mention of a sister in the sealed complaint. Sarah found herself at a crossroads. Layla might indeed have a twin, a partner in crime, or a separate individual entirely. Either possibility spelled trouble for David, and by extension, Sarah. If Layla had roped David into a blackmail scheme, the scandal could destroy his reputation and the philanthropic work Sarah herself cherished. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in an even more unexpected way. Late one afternoon, Sarah received a cryptic text from a number labeled unknown. Meet me at the Green Leaf Cafe on 5th. I have information about Layla. Come alone. A friend. Wary of a trap, Sarah nearly ignored it, but curiosity and a desire to protect herself compelled her to go. She arrived at the cafe, a cozy, dimly lit space, scanning the patrons nervously. A tall, lean man in a baseball cap stood and waved her over. As she approached, he took off the cap, revealing salt and pepper hair. She recognized him vaguely from a magazine cover, Jean-Louis Moreau. Her heart hammered as she sat down, unsure how to proceed. Moreau spoke first, his English tinged with a delicate accent. Mrs. Harrington, thank you for coming. I apologize for the clandestine approach, but we share a common predicament. She regarded him with cold caution. You claim to have information about Layla St. James. His lips curled into a faint smile. Or Linda Macpherson, or whatever she calls herself these days. Sarah's breath caught. So it's true. Moreau leaned in. I contacted your husband, but he seems enamored by her. Or perhaps she's convinced him of a sob story. Either way, he is not receptive. But you, Mrs. Harrington, you have more at stake if this escalates further. He slid an envelope across the table. Sarah opened it to find printed emails, photographs, documents linking Layla to a series of art deals with suspicious authenticity. One photo showed a woman identical to Layla holding hands with a second woman, a near doppelganger. Another picture captured them in front of a Belgian art gallery, rumored to deal in forgeries. The timestamps suggested these were from a few years ago. Proof of her partnership with her twin, who is equally cunning. Moreau explained. They swindled me and they swindled others. I want them both to face justice. But your husband is in the way, blindly protecting her. Sarah felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, bitterness, heartbreak, and a strange sense of vindication. Part of her wanted to lash out at David. Part of her wanted to pity him. She also wondered what Moreau expected from her. Moreau eyed her. I need your help. Influence your husband to break ties with her. If he continues to shield her, she will only drag him further into the mud. And I suspect her sister lurks in the shadows, planning something bigger. Perhaps the blackmail we are hearing about Sarah swallowed hard. What do you get out of this? his brow furrowed. Closure, justice, and the chance to salvage what's left of my reputation in Europe. Also a certain moral satisfaction in knowing these sisters don't dupe anyone else. They parted ways with a tense handshake. Sarah clutched the envelope as if it were a time bomb. Her marriage had been on the brink of collapse, but this new knowledge gave her a sense of responsibility. She had to warn David, if only to protect him from sinking deeper into a catastrophic scandal. She also felt a measure of compassion. Despite his betrayal, David was still the man she once loved, and no matter how furious she felt, she didn't want him ruined by these manipulations. That night she found herself driving to David's penthouse, not entirely sure how she would approach the subject. The envelope of evidence sat on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. She thought of all the ways this meeting could go. Would David believe her? Would Layla be there, spitting venom at Sarah's intrusion? One thing was certain: the next steps she took could determine the fate of both their futures and possibly save David from the greatest betrayal of his life. Sarah arrived at David's penthouse just after dusk, her nerves taut with urgency. The doorman let her in, without question. As she stepped off the private elevator, she found David pacing the living room phone clutched in hand. He froze when he saw her guilt, relief, and dread flashing across his face. "Sarah," he began. She raised a hand. "I know everything. I'm here to stop you from making a terrible mistake." Without another word, she extended the envelope Jean-Louis Moreau had given her. David took it, flipped through its contents, photographs of Layla and her twin emails detailing suspicious art deals and banking documents that hinted at blackmail. His face tightened with disbelief. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. "From Moreau," Sarah said. "He claims Layla and her sister ran a sophisticated art scam, and now she's entangled you in it." David looked stunned. "Layla told me her sister set her up, that she's the victim here." "She also told you she'd be honest with investigators," Sarah countered. "Did she ever show you this?" She pointed to a photo of Layla and her sister, exchanging a thick envelope, both smiling. Before David could reply, Layla stepped out of a side room. Her hair was tousled, her eyes burning. "You're working with that man, Sarah. That manipulative monster." Sarah didn't flinch. "You've been hiding too much. If you're innocent, prove it. I was trying to protect David." Layla cried. "My sister threatened us both. I didn't plan to fall in love, but I did." Everything changed. Before David could react, Layla's phone buzzed. She paled, then bolted toward her bag. Her belongings spilled across the floor, lipstick's wallet and a folded note. Sarah snatched it up. "Swiss wire transfer instructions," she read aloud. "Is this your sister's next payment?" Layla's defenses crumbled. "I was going to handle it. I didn't want David dragged through this." "So you'd rather pay hush money than tell the truth?" Sarah's voice was tight with disgust. David stared at Layla, torn between fury and heartbreak. "You told me we were into this together, but you lied again. I had to." Layla shouted, tears streaming. "I knew if you doubted me, you'd walk away." David's face hardened. "And now I just might." The room fell into tense silence. Then quietly, David picked up his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, dialing. "Let them figure out who's lying." Layla lunged for the phone, but Sarah stepped in her way. A moment later, the call connected. The decision was made. Sirens approached in the distance. Layla collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Sarah turned away, fighting back tears of her own, of betrayal, loss, and something like pity. The truth would unravel in the days to come. Investigators would trace the blackmail, expose the twins' identity, and sort through Layla's involvement. David's public image would take a hit, but it would survive. Whether his marriage did only time would tell. But for now, the storm outside mirrored the one within, and none of their lives would ever be the same. Betrayal, scandal, and secret identities. This story proves that even the most powerful among us can be undone by hidden truths. In the end, David Harrington learned the hard way that wealth and influence can't shield you from the consequences of deception. Sarah, despite her heartbreak, found renewed strength in confronting the lies head-on rather than remaining a silent victim. As for Layla or Linda, her fate was sealed by the very illusions she spun, reminding us that the truth always finds a way to surface. If you were captivated by the twists, betrayals, and dramatic showdowns in this real-life saga, help us shine more light on stories that need to be told. Like this video, share it with friends who love jaw-dropping drama, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can unravel even more astonishing tales lurking behind the polished veneers of the rich and the restless.